Amen. Lord bless our meeting.
Amen.
Bless this watching.
Amen.
Impart your burden into each one of our hearts.
Amen.
To receive what you're speaking.
Amen.
Lord, grant us revelation.
Amen.
Grant us listeners' knowledge.
Amen.
Brothers and sisters, the messages are over, but we do have one very important presentation that I hope we can expedite and finish somewhere around 9:30, maybe a few minutes beyond that. And I hope as much as possible, some of you need to go and get the, whatever you need to do, but as much as possible, please stay for this presentation. I will say a few words, and after that we will be playing a 17-minute video or a narrated slideshow, and the bulk of the burden will be actually there. But let me just say this first. In these years, especially since Brother Lee's passing, it is very, very evident to us that the Lord, as the King and as the one who has the key of David, has opened a wide door for his recovery. Amen. A door in all the continents, all over the earth, that no man can shut. Witness what he did firstly in the former Soviet Union, and then in Western Europe, and then in Mexico, and then in Asia, the subcontinent, now in Central Asia, Near East, and so on and so forth, in Africa, now in South America, of course in Australia, Australasia. In all these places, the Lord has opened a wide and effectual door to his recovery. Now, we feel at this juncture, the Lord still has something to do, and that he still needs to move on to gain North America for himself. Amen. This is not just a burden for North America, this is really a burden of the Lord's recovery. Amen. And so I hope this fellowship would not be just directed to the saints in this continent, but indeed to all the saints throughout the earth who will pray and stand with the Lord for this burden. Now, this video that we'll be showing now momentarily will give you the view of the Lord's move since the beginning in this country until today, and it will lead into a particular burden that the co-workers have for next year and this decade, this coming decade, as to what the Lord will do and can do if we cooperate with him. There's a very specific burden with some specific plan, if you will, that we want to share with you tonight, but not in any kind of great detail at all. Those details are forthcoming in the coming months. So I would like all of you to direct your attention to the screens and to the television in front of you for the next 17 minutes. Please stay and absorb the burden that is conveyed there.
Widespread move of gospelizing, truthizing, and churchizing Taiwan is an unprecedented blessing and even a great act in church history. I hope that all of us will receive this burden and fellowship with the churches and the saints about this, so that we may all participate in this glorious move. Now, I know the Taiwanese will evangelize and truthize within the next 4 years. is to take Taiwan first, and then the United States second. I'm for the Lord's recovery, and I believe in His strength. Two matters are sovereign of the Lord. The first is that He has prepared the United States to be a great eagle. And the second is that He has sent His recovery to this country. God's way is the local churches. Hallelujah. We are in the local churches. Hallelujah. We are in the United States. We are in the genuine church life, and we are in the country of the great eagle. Praise Him for sending His recovery to this country.
The Lord began a fresh move in His recovery in the virgin soil of mainland China with Watchman Nee in the 1920s. In 1932, Witness Lee invited Watchman Nee to his hometown of Chifu. Receiving the vision of the one flow of the Lord's work, Brother Lee left a flourishing work in northern China and joined himself to Watchman Nee in Shanghai in 1934. Due to the change of the political situation in China in 1949, Watchman Nee sent Witness Lee to Taiwan to ensure that the things delivered to them by the Lord would be preserved. Witness Lee began the work in Taiwan in 1949 and through the 1950s split his time between Taiwan and the Philippines. In 1958, Brother Lee took his first trip to the West, visiting the United States as well as Europe and Israel. There were two major impressions from his travels. First, the impoverished condition of believers due to the lack of depth in spiritual writings. And second, the lack of a home for the many wandering believers. By his third visit to the U.S. in 1962, through considerable inward struggle, Brother Lee became clear that the flow of the Lord's work was leading him to stay in the United States. This marked a distinct turn in the Lord's move. The Lord transferred the ministry out of the Far East to America and out of the confinement of the Chinese language into what was rapidly becoming the New World language, American English. In addition to the ministry of the Word, Brother Lee began the work in the United States with prayer and by visiting seeking believers throughout the country. In December 1962, prior to beginning the work in this country, Brother Lee, along with two other brothers, prayed every morning for 3 weeks for the United States. They prayed for the Lord's move in this country and for the spread of the ministry. They also prayed earnestly that the Lord would raise up the seeking believers and that the Lord would gain the American people for a proper testimony in this country. Immediately after sharing the All-Inclusive Christ Conference, Brother Lee began to receive invitations from Christian groups across the United States. Driven by Brother Samuel Chang, Brother Lee began to traverse the country, sometimes detouring several hours to speak to just 1 or 2 people. As these factors began to sovereignly align, the Lord's recovery entered a period of momentous growth, increase, and spread. To give an indication of the growth from the 1960s to the 1970s, in 1962, there were only about 24 meeting in the home of Brother Samuel Chang. This grew to 300 saints in Elman Hall by 1968, and over 3,000 in 1972 at the Los Angeles Convention Center, when Brother Lee released the classic message, Crazy Lovers of Jesus. Brother Lee, speaking of the ministry, was matched by a prevailing spirit of the gospel and migration. In the early 1970s, many saints migrated out of Los Angeles to establish the Lord's testimony in leading U.S. cities, including Seattle, Chicago, Detroit, Atlanta, Philadelphia, and Boston. The work on the campuses also grew, with a focus toward the concentration of leading campuses in the Northeast. Brother Lee was burdened to take the larger campuses first, then the smaller campuses, and in this process spread to Europe and ultimately to Israel. Shortly thereafter, the enemy came in to frustrate the growth of the Lord's recovery. Internally, a turmoil broke out in the late 1970s. Externally, negative writings were published concerning Brother Lee and the local churches. The turmoil within and the opposition without brought the increase and spread of the Lord's recovery virtually to a halt. Nevertheless, Brother Lee persisted to labor and to minister faithfully. His speaking continued to inject life and truth into the churches. In the last 15 years of his life, Brother Lee completed the New Testament recovery version and the life study of the entire Bible, researched and presented the practice of the God-ordained way and the vital groups, released the high peak of the divine revelation, and took the lead to spread the Lord's recovery to the countries of the former Soviet Union. Even in going to Russia, however, it was clear Brother Lee's heart remained deeply burdened for the United States of America.